What if I told you that the fall of the Roman Empire might possibly have been the best thing that could have happened to humanity? Now, if you're a Rome fan like me and you love the Roman Empire, then you might rightfully be outraged. How should the fall of this beautiful and great civilization have been a good thing? The whole point of my channel, after all, is to show that the fall of the Roman Empire was a giant tragedy for humanity, and that the ensuing Middle Ages were for the most part really not such a fun time. So how then do I even dare to say such a thing? Well, yes, from one perspective, the fall of Rome was a gigantic civilizational tragedy of the highest magnitude. We lost magnificent cities, the likes of which the world would never see again. Rome itself must have been utterly spectacular in its prime. We lost great works of art, magnificent, splendid temples and buildings, knowledge, writings, architecture, technology, and culture in general. And we would see almost 1,000 years of ensuing darkness in the West. But what if I told you that the Roman Empire was actually surprisingly stagnant? What if I told you that empires, for the most part, in general, are surprisingly stagnant? You would probably say that I'm insane. And you know what else is insane? People selling your private data, your full name, your email, employment history, even your phone number and your home address on the internet. According to the Identity Theft Resource Center, data breaches have gone up significantly in the last years, which means that your data is probably being sold by so-called data brokers right now as we speak. There are hundreds of them, and they make a profit by selling your private data to third parties. As you can imagine, this information could also fall into the hands of criminals. This exposes us to a wide range of dangers: scams, identity theft, online harassment, or even stalking. I too was a victim of a data breach once, and then I received hundreds of spam phone calls which made me change my phone number, which was all a super annoying experience. I wish I had known back then that there actually is a solution to this problem. Enter the sponsor of today's video, Incogni. Incogni is a service that contacts all these data brokers on your behalf automatically without you having to do anything, and requests them to remove you from all these lists. They are obliged by law to follow this request. Now, you could in theory do it yourself, but since there are so many of them, this would take you years and a lot of your precious time. So with a yearly subscription, Incogni constantly monitors all these data broker lists and will request your info to be deleted as soon as it pops up anywhere. So you don't have to do anything, and your data will vanish step by step from all these lists. I think this is an excellent service. If you use the code below in the video description, you get an incredible 60% off the annual Incogni plan. Quite the incredible deal if you ask me. 60% off, and you can just sit back and relax and watch your private data vanish from all these lists. So back to the video. Let's just look at when the Romans were most innovative. When did the Romans have their peak of technology and of innovation? Well, pretty early on in the empire, as it turns out, in the 1st and 2nd centuries AD. Once the good times were over, however, there was stagnation. If we look at this graph here that shows pollution over time gathered from Greenland ice core samples, we can see that the air pollution due to industrial activity was highest in the times of the Roman Republic and the early empire. But from around 200 to 600 AD, it would decline massively. That means that the empire never again reached the mining capability and the industrial output as it had in its earlier days, when it was still expanding and when innovation was needed in order to invent the very idea of the Roman Empire. But once that was all achieved and the first crises hit, there was remarkable stagnation technology-wise. The giant watermills at Barbegal, this almost industrial revolution of Roman times, where the Romans built a giant industrial-scale watermill complex, harnessing water power in order to grind massive amounts of grain to feed the population of the nearby city of Arelate. That complex was built not in the 200s or 300s AD or later, but in the early hundreds AD, when the Roman Empire had reached peak expansion. And this is no coincidence. Nothing coming even remotely close to that scale would be built later by the Romans. Later, there was remarkable stagnation. Large empires, in fact, equal stagnation. They are very innovative at first in their growing phase. When they have reached their maximum, they become stagnant. Why? Because they become complacent. They start to rest on their success. Now you might say this is just a Roman thing because they had slaves, which prevented innovation from happening in the first place. No, this is a hallmark of all large empires. Even if we look at China, the most innovative empire, who came up with an astounding number of impressive innovations such as the compass, gunpowder, paper money, printing, and more. The Industrial Revolution still did not happen in China. In fact, in the 19th century, when the Industrial Revolution was in full swing in Europe and in America, China was surprisingly backward. This is because China, having been most of the time a unified empire since the 3rd century BC, it had no need to innovate a lot. Innovations mostly happened when there was actually disunification, when rivaling Chinese kingdoms warred against each other. But then, when there was unification again under a single Chinese emperor, stagnation was the norm. And this prevented, in most part, these inventions from going any further. And this is why the Industrial Revolution did not happen at first in China, but it started in Western Europe. But why in Western Europe though? Well, the fall of the Western Roman Empire left a complete and utter vacuum. So the successor states of the Western Roman Empire, the Visigothic kingdom, the Frankish kingdom, all these other young Germanic kingdoms, they had to reinvent themselves from scratch. They built their kingdoms on the ruins of the Roman Empire, but the fall of the Roman Empire ultimately caused this multitude of Germanic successor states, this fracturing of empire into many small subunits. And what happens when you have many rivaling, competing states? Suddenly, you don't have a unified large empire anymore, but warring, rivaling kingdoms who many times don't like each other so much. Well, let me tell you what happens. Competition. Survival of the fittest. Europe, after the fall of mighty Rome, basically became a sandbox, a playground for new and fresh ideas. If you wanted your nation state to be successful, you better were damn innovative, because if not, your neighbor was pretty sure to conquer you. So this unique fracturization of Europe into all these small kingdoms and duchies and later city-states of northern Italy, this is exactly what created an incredibly fertile soil for innovation. You had to remain super competitive and innovative if you wanted to gain the upper hand over your European neighbor state. And so this led to the creation of trade networks, of exploration, of universities, of technological innovations. And that was the state of Western Europe in the late Middle Ages. A super ultra competitive mass of rivaling kingdoms, duchies and city-states. But something was still missing. One final thing was missing that would ignite this spark that would then lead to the Industrial Revolution. The fall of the Western Roman Empire allowed for this super competitive landscape of rivaling nations of Germanic descent to arise, infused with the remnants of Roman culture. But the spark that was still missing was the Enlightenment, the Renaissance, the rediscovery of the ideals and of the culture of antiquity. And while the first fall of Rome, that is, the fall of the Western Roman Empire with the old city of Rome, allowed for this to arise in the first place, the second fall of Rome, that is, the fall of the Eastern Roman Empire, was the final gift of the Roman Empire to the world. Because there were actually two Romes. The old Rome, in the Western Roman Empire, whose fall in the late 5th or early 6th century AD created this fertile soil for incredible innovation, this sandbox of ideas. And the second fall of Rome, the fall of Constantinople in 1453 AD, sent the final infusion to the West, in form of scholars that fled the fall of the city to the West Scholars such as John Agyropoulos, Bessarion, Manuel Chrysolaras, and many more. Most of all to the city-states of northern Italy, bringing with them many of the old surviving works of the famous scholars of antiquity, the works of Plato, of Aristotle, of Euclid, of Pythagoras, and others. There was already a huge run-up in innovation in the 13th and 14th centuries in Europe, but this rediscovery of antiquity brought to the West by the Eastern Roman scholars fleeing from the fall of Constantinople was the final parting gift of the Roman Empire to the world. This is what in great parts caused the Enlightenment, which then led to greater secularization, a diminishing of the power of the Church, further creating this much needed boost towards ever greater innovation. The rediscovery of the beauty of the old, in combination with this boundless innovation of the rivaling nation-states of Europe, this is what ultimately made the Industrial Revolution possible. The age of exploration began, opening up completely new trade routes, the founding of the New World, the need to invent machines that could do ever increasingly efficient work. This, in the end, created industry. There was a need to invent machines in order to maximize profits, maximize the advantage over others, maximize industrial output. And so without the fall of Rome, the fall of the old Rome and the fall of Constantinople, possibly the Industrial Revolution might not have happened. Or if, then later, and probably also only in a parallel universe where the Roman Empire would have become disunited. I think the Industrial Revolution in an alternate timeline, an alternate universe where the Roman Empire survived, in my opinion, would have probably been only possible if this Roman Empire would have fractured into rivaling mini sub-Roman empires or rivaling Roman states, if you will. Because for innovation, you need competition. Also a fascinating alternate reality to think about. So there you have it. This is how, in my opinion, the fall of Rome in two stages, the fall of the old Rome and the fall of the new Rome, created the Industrial Revolution. It infused Europe with competition through rivalry and with the necessary ideals and culture, the culture of antiquity. And if you like my videos, please consider supporting me via Patreon or via a YouTube membership. I would be super thankful, and I like to think that Maiorian hopefully too. After all, this channel is dedicated to the memory of this legendary late Western Roman Emperor. And of course, please like and subscribe so that you won't miss any future videos on the fascinating era of the late Roman Empire. And I would of course like to thank everyone who is supporting Maiorianus in any form, be it through Patreon, YouTube membership, or via a PayPal donation. Thank you so much, friends, for supporting Maiorianus so that I can keep this a channel about late Roman history. And if you want to learn more about the fall of the old Rome, you can watch this video here in the upper right corner. But if you want to learn more about the fall of the new Rome, Constantinople, Nova Roma, you can watch the other video in the lower right corner. I say thanks again to all friends of Roman history, gratias tibiago and bene valete.